Good day, Ace and Cecilia. First of all, I'd like to thank you for helping to participate in this virtual panel to discuss the future of missions. And to provide some context for our online class, this past few weeks have been reviewing the history of the church and how God has been using the church for missions. And for the benefit of our panelists, we've been using the term church in the context of the teaching series to describe the universal church, the assembly of believers around the world. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So really the first question is, for those who here who may or may not know you, maybe you can describe a little bit about yourself and where you're from, a little bit about your background, both the spiritual and physical, and where you are now, and what is the current role of the Christian church, and what is it that you're doing these days?
Sure, maybe I'll start. I was born in Yellowknife in Canada. I grew up in Edmonton and in a very ethnically diverse neighborhood. My parents brought me to church ever since I can remember, and I made the decision to follow Jesus Christ when I was a teen, early teens at a summer camp. And I really loved to serve in the church by then. Later on, I responded to an altar call, actually the same time that Cecilia did, to go into missions if God was ever to call us into missions. But 10 years later, that's when we finally started into the process of going into missions, and then we ended up in Niger. And by then I was a family physician, so I run a clinic 2 mornings a week. The rest of the time, I develop ways to share Jesus Christ in word and deed with Tuaregs. So the Tuaregs in our spheres include our house guards, men's cooperative group, and people at a local church.
My name is Cecilia. I was born in Malaysia, and my family and we immigrated to Canada when I was 7 years old. So I too also grew up in Edmonton. I came to Christ in university by 21. And like you said, we responded to an altar call at our home church. And then later, we made our way to Niger, in the capital. My main role here is run a girls' sewing school for girls who have never gone to school or have gone for a few years. I also work with Tuareg women in micro business, village savings and loans program, and really just journeying with them throughout life.
Yeah, sorry, the internet just cut out a little bit. Just the last sentence.
My main role here is running a sewing school for my main role here is running a sewing school for girls who have either never gone to school or have gone to school for only a few years of their lives. And I also work with Tuareg women, just journeying with them throughout their life, and also in micro business and village savings and loans programs.
Great, thank you. The second question I have for you guys is how does the work of the sending office, the administration side, and the sending home church support the field workers?
We feel very fortunate for our sending office. The main office support us in quite a number of ways, one of which is the mission, the vision, and the strategy, more on a global level, not so much on a country level or a people group level. But we appreciate that. And then, of course, there's this whole aspect of administration and finance that they take care of, and that they support us in as well. They also support us in member care. So if there's any needs, whether it's physical or spiritual, we'll be support. So there's spiritual formation. If we need any medical tests, that we are supported in that way. And then also in equipping. So again, spiritual formation, language acquisition, and while on the field. And then also recruitment for our team. They're for our team. They're the ones that are going to help us recruit and bring people to the field. We feel like for our home church, it's very much the same, but on a more personal level, they connect with us directly, more so than the sending office. So they know more intimately what our needs are from day to day or week to week. They're just more quickly, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really, we're very fortunate to have dual support of both national and the home church. I mean, for example, the funding model, if it wasn't a pool funded model, maybe it would have been very difficult for us to do personal fundraising, both culturally and personally for us. And so we're very fortunate for that model within the Alliance. And then again, as Cecilia said, is for personal in terms of the home church. We get to know individuals, a little more one-on-one contact and interactions, and you know, whether that's through short-term teams or church visits, or even volunteers who come to feed us spiritually, directly or indirectly, their interaction.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Moving on to a little bit of your work in Niger, what are some of the challenges in working cross-culturally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, there's at least two challenges that I can name. One is that culture is constantly changing, especially in today's world. You know, what was traditional culture here in Niger is changing and adapting to all the new influences that are coming from abroad. So you're trying to aim at a moving target in terms of learning something. And so what used to maybe become was very right and wrong is a little bit more gray before. The other aspect, I think, is that there are a lot of expectations we put on ourselves and also from others that need to be adjusted when we work cross-culturally. It's almost like being this grown-up or this little child in a grown-up body where we don't know anything, but we're expected to know better, and we should in some ways, and other ways we have no idea. For example, you know, just yesterday, I had one of our employees come. He wanted to come, and I asked Ricardo, why did he come? And he said, I don't know. And so he just comes in. He talks about, you know, just chit chat about the virus, talking about, oh, it's hot. There's a lot of sun. It's hot out, and he doesn't ask for anything. But I'm supposed to know that it's the end of the month, so he's come for his salary, and he didn't even ask for that. But I'm just supposed to clue in. And so that's where one of the expectations of, you know, I should know that as an employer that he is coming for that. And yet, you know, if I hadn't been here before or for many years, I might not clue in for quite a while. And then he'd have to ask, and he's like, you know, he probably think it's so obvious why I'm here. Why should I have to ask? Making me ask, giving me shame for asking.
Right. No, that's a great example. Yeah.
And I think just to tag along with what Ace is saying is because it's cross-cultural, we have our culture and the host country has theirs. And because we're here, we do our best to learn and to fit in as long as it's still glorifying God, the pieces of their culture that we adapt to. However, they don't necessarily feel like they need to come towards us, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so which is completely understandable and it's reasonable. And yet it sets up the stage for misunderstanding because you're coming from two different cultures. So that we find is a challenge. And the last thing I want to mention is a sense of, I don't know if fatigue is the right word, but when you get up in the morning and you head out the door, there's a constant second guessing of yourself because we're not in our own culture and you don't want to mess up, you want to get it right. And so you're always thinking, is this person coming to see me for this reason? Is it for that reason? And then I don't want to insult the people that I'm with. I don't want to offend my friend. So then when you come home, you feel like you're always second guessing all the things that you've said all day. And so that tends to go away over time as we learn the culture. But and I remember Ace saying this when we were heading home once, and he said, we're going home. Like, people are going to understand me. And when they talk to me, I'm going to understand exactly what they mean, you know? And we're not even talking language. It's just what do they mean? Because in our context, it's very much indirect communication. And for us, having grown up in the Western world, we're very direct, and that's the culture that we've been raised in. And so it's a sense of fatigue to always second guess your actions.
Right.
That's a big one.
Right. No, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Um, Next question is, do you see some of the tools or some of the aids that we have today, or perhaps in the future, helping to mitigate some of those challenges?
I don't know if these are new, but one is just language resources. We learned French in Quebec at Laval University for 2 semesters before we came out, which was hugely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But once we got killed, we were working with the Tuaregs, and they don't speak French. They have their own language, and so attempting to learn their language was very challenging. So we're hoping that there would be more language resources that will become available. Um, the other thing is just to have cross-cultural experience, just to go and experience what it's like to work cross-culturally. And it doesn't even have to be outside of Canada. It can be right there in your neighborhood these days. So to have that sense, to know what it feels like to be in someone's culture and to learn the understanding, the humility that it's going to take, and to learn to have the attitude of a learner, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In one of the earlier classes, I presented one of the stats for the population of Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
The population of Toronto, the quote unquote visible minority, has now become the majority.
Mm-hmm.
So,
wow.
So there's more than 50%. It's about 52% of people living in Toronto that are visible minority. It's no longer a minority; it's the visible majority.
Yeah, wow. That's a lot of opportunity there too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think.
Go ahead.
So I think if anything, I would just add that when we do have those, like take advantage of those times of immersion into another culture, that we do it with the humble learning attitude. Because we can dive straight into another culture, but we don't have to learn a thing. We can be wanting to impose our own ways, or other times when we're stressed, we can become very critical. So really, it's just going in with an attitude of, well, what can I learn about this culture? What can God show me about my weaknesses in my culture as well, or my own upbringing, and just being that learning, a humble learner when we do have those experiences.
Yeah, excellent reminder, and in going through the history, and I'm reminded of the history of that conqueror mentality that has been taken place in the past of the past Christian church. So yeah, that's an excellent reminder. Thank you. Next question: in the sharing of the gospel, how do you see the notion of balancing the Word of God with the physical needs of the people?
Yeah, living here in Niger, where it's one of the poorest countries in the world, we definitely see the need to think about and minister both physical and spiritual needs. As James in chapter 2 of James says, where's your faith without work? And so we have to match what we do. And that's what Jesus did too. He didn't just come and heal spiritually, he actually healed physically as well. And so he ministered physical need. He didn't just say, oh, you have a physical need? Well, I don't care about that. It's actually only your spiritual need I'm worried about. So as we follow Jesus, I feel like we are called to also follow his model of how he loved the complete person, the whole man, and the whole world too.
The whole idea of loving the whole man, and we can't go into a relationship with, and I'll use the example of Ace being the doctor. If I have a relationship, and especially in a country like Niger where the need is so great, for us to go into a village and run medical, let's say, and for us to say, we will treat you if you watch the Jesus film. If they watch the Jesus film and we'll run it, that's wonderful. But if they refuse, then we are compelled to still treat them physically and still to grow the relationship, still to love our can't go into it thinking it's not a bait. We will give you what you need physically if you listen to what you have to say about your own life. I think that's an important way of doing that is doing the commitment. You love the entire person, even if they read the gospel, you're in a friendship, this is gonna love her anyway. So we keep praying and we ask for her salvation. Yet that's the model that what Jesus taught us.
Great, thank you. Looking a little bit forward now, the next question is one of the projections that we have for world population is by 2050, fully 2/3 of the world population will live in an urban environment, which is very different from the past. In the past, most people have lived in a rural setting. So we can see that the world population is moving towards urban centers. Do you see the role of urban ministry in the world to continue taking on sort of a larger role as part of this strategy of missions?
We feel like it has to, Jim. If this is the way that people are moving, if we're going to make an impact as a church to build this kingdom, we're going to have to. And we're just going to have to be more creative and more open-minded in how we approach this. But we feel like if this is where people are moving to, then we have to. And one example are the Tuaregs right here. They're nomadic herders and they're warriors. They're up in the Sahara Desert. They don't want to be in the city of Niamey or in any city. They want to roam. But the reality is they were hit really hard with 2 droughts, and they've been driven into the city to find work and food and shelter for their families. So their whole livelihood has been disrupted. And so in a sense, they're being driven into the cities. And so this is where we need to work. Also, insecurity in Niger has really driven a lot of the workers like us to stay in the cities as well, because we're no longer able to go out. And we see, so in both ways, the nationals are coming into the cities, and we need to stay.
Yeah, thank you. And finally, a sort of an open-ended question for you guys. How do you see God using the church in his mission for humanity? Very general, very wide open.
I think I see God using the church in new and unexpected ways. Because yes, our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but he's also an infinite God. And so it's hard for us, I think, to see the extent of his creativity, the extent of his ways of working, just by looking at one little bit of history. So even if we look at the Bible, God works in so many different ways, and I don't think he's done showing us all those different ways. So with that in mind, I think we can continue praying and seeking and asking for direction for new ideas. Not that old ideas can't work, but that maybe we'll have to adapt old ideas to new contexts or come up with new ideas, and not put God in a box in terms of methods to say that the only ways he can work are ways that he has in the past. His principles and who he is will not change, but I think how that is manifest in the world will always be new and surprising, and we'll always say, wow, isn't that amazing how God worked in that way? He'll just show his glory even more and more in different ways.
Yeah.
I'm really excited when I see, I don't know what you call them. We used to call them second milers. Do we still call them that? People who are near the end of their secular career, perhaps, and now they're looking at what is God calling us to do. So they're opening up themselves and their resources, and many of them are self-funded. They go out into the world, into places where their skills that God has gifted them with is invaluable, and they don't see that 65 or 60 that's the end. I'm going to put up my feet and retire. They're actually excited to go and build the kingdom. And we get excited when we hear about, and they get a lot of flack, but I'm, the millennials. But I get really excited, passionate about social issues. They love God. They put their money where their mouth is, and they're willing to take an issue that they're passionate about and they do something about it. So as I see them and the younger generation and what they are passionate about, that's really exciting. And I think as people like us, we're, late 40s, 50s, we just have to be, as that just to hold it loosely in our hands and to be just to let God use what He is bringing about for His glory. So we don't need to stick to the old paradigms and be uncomfortable, and we don't need to fear when something looks different. If the church is going to be planted, where we don't expect it, then if God's in it, just let Him do it. So I think that's what's really exciting. God is moving in these next times.
Yeah, well said. Um, I'm gonna end with one last question that wasn't prepared. How's the heat?
It's hot.
It's here, and it's humid, and there's still coronavirus. So
I was just saying to Ace the other day, this is truly God's mercy that every year when hot season comes, I actually genuinely say, wow, it's really hot. It's like I actually forget how hot it gets, because if I remember it, I'm not sure I could be here every year. But that's God's mercy. We forget, and then it's like it's over. The rains will come, and it'll be okay. And then we don't have to think about next year till it comes again. But we're right in the middle of it right now, so it's hot.
I want to show you our thermometer. It says 40 outside in the shade for our terrace.
and haven't experienced the heat. I feel for you guys. I feel for you guys.
Yeah, firsthand you did. Yeah, you guys were brave.
Very, yeah. I think you're the only team that during hot season, if I can remember.
We had one team once, team.
Who got very sick also.
Yeah, they got yeah.
Well, I remember I got hit pretty hard.
Well, we haven't had anyone need an IV yet, so we're okay.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. And I will end the recording now.